The following video will be for RLC Racing Pro Analysis software. In this video, we'll be going over everything to do with the graphing section of the Pro Race Analysis software. The graphing section is where you'll graph sensor data. To create a graph, select a sensor from the list of sensors in the Current Data tab and click on it. It will highlight in red. In the graphing section, you will notice that a box has appeared, prompting you to create a graph. You can also click on a sensor you want and drag and drop on the graphing section. This method can also be used when you want to add additional sensors to already existing graphs. You can also choose to select multiple sensors to graph at once. Generally, you want to graph like sensors on the same graph, example front brake and rear brakes. This way the scale value are similar. However, if you want to graph unlike sensors, example RPM and speed, you will want to set up separate axis values, covered in more detail in a later section. A graph of that sensor will appear in the graphing window. The graph will be of the sensor data over the selected lap. The selected lap will be the fastest lap when you first load a session. You will notice that there is a vertical cursor. The cursor indicates the position of the data and is linked to the GPS track position. You can click anywhere on the graph and the cursor will jump to that exact position and give you sensor data and exact place. The GPS track position and synchronized video will also jump to that exact position. In the upper left hand corner of the graphs, the sensors that are being graphed are identified, also with a sensor name and color in which the sensor is graphed. This will help to differentiate if multiple sensors are graphed. It will display and show the value of the sensor data at that location. You can set up your graphs and graphing section in the manner you're liking with options on the top of the graphing section. You can choose to view the sensor data in particular lap or over entire race session. You can also choose to compare sensor data in different laps. Simply click on the lap button on the left and choose the lap or laps you want to view on the graph. You can also choose to view the data based on distance or time. Click on the distance or time button to change the scale. There is also an option to let you select how many graphs you would like per graphing tab. The number of graphs will depend on the resolution of your screen. The higher the resolution, the more graphs you will display per tab. To start on a new page of graphs, click on the Graph tab. The maximum number of graphs you can have per tab is 5, and you can also have 5 graphing tabs. That is up to 25 graphs at one time. When you graph your data, you are going to want to apply some data averaging techniques in order to get a smooth, precise data. As in any data, there is always some erroneous data. In order to get rid of the data points which don't fit, you can average the data. Of course, you do not need to apply data averaging, but we do recommend it. Click Data in the menu bar, select Heavy Averaging, and Data Discard 10% from Neighbors. This will smooth out your data and allow you to analyze your data easily. To analyze the sensor data even more closely, you can zoom in on the graph. You can either choose to do an x-axis zoom, y-axis zoom, or create a box over a section of graph you would like to zoom in on. To do an x-axis zoom, click anywhere on the graph, hold the mouse down, and drag it horizontally. You will see a highlighted area in red on the graph. The highlighted area indicates the area which the data will be zoomed in on. When you release the mouse, the graph now will zoom in on that highlighted area. The smaller the highlighted area, the more zoomed in the graph will be. For a y-axis zoom, do the same thing, only drag the mouse vertically and the highlighted section, blue, will appear. To create a box, simply click the mouse and drag it vertically and horizontally. You will see a highlighted area in yellow. When you are zoomed in on the graph, there may be parts of the graph that you cannot see. Use the scroll bar at the bottom to view all data. When you want to zoom out, simply click the minus button in the bottom left-hand corner. If you want to zoom in even more, you can analyze your data at full screen. To do this, click on the triangle button in the upper right-hand corner of the graph. Doing this will make the graph full screen and take place of all other windows. To exit out of the full screen, click the X button. If you do not want the current graph or want to replace it with a different sensor data, click the X button and close the graph. When you want to graph multiple sensors per graph, you will simply select a sensor you want to graph from the Current Data tab. The selected sensor will highlight in red and a box will appear in the graphing section, prompting you to graph the sensor. You can also choose to drag and drop the sensor into the graphing section Each sensor is identified with a different color. Usually when you graph multiple sensors, you want them to have similar values so they fit the graph. For example, front and rear brake. If you graph sensors that don't have similar values, for example RPM and speed, you get a graph that doesn't make much sense. The y-axes are so different that it's difficult to analyze the data of the two different sensors. What you can do is to change the scale on one of the sensors. You can assign a primary scale and secondary scale. This will create a graph with two y-axes. One corresponds to each sensor. Now you can easily analyze the data. You can also choose the minimum and maximum values to be shown on the scale by clicking the numbers in the parentheses and typing in different values. If you have an existing graph and you want to add additional sensors to it, simply select a sensor in the current data tab and drag and drop over the graph you want to add to. You will notice that a second y-axis will be created in red on the right hand side and the graph corresponds to additional sensor data. Now you can analyze both sensors on the same graph and you're able to read both sensor data easily. After you have finished setting up the graph the way you like, such as axis scales and multiple sensors on a graph, you can easily save it for the future. Once saved, you can open up the same graph setup at any time for any log file. To save a graph set up the way you like with all the sensors of your choosing, even including math equations. When you are satisfied with the graph setup, click the graph button in the top right hand corner of the graph and a Save Graph window will appear. Enter the name you want to call the graph, select whether you want to auto-scale or the scaling you created, and then click Save. If you are editing an existing graph, you can choose to save over existing graph by selecting the graph from the list and click Save. To load a Save Graph setup, click on the Save Graph icon in the top right hand corner of the graph window. A drop-down list will appear and you can make your selection in which the graph you want to load. At any time you can choose to save a current graph as a picture so you can print it out and save it in your records for future use. To save the graph as a picture, click on the picture button on the top right hand corner of the graph. It will open up a window prompting you to select where you want to save it on your computer and what file format to save it as. To learn more about the ProRaceNow software, please watch our other tutorial videos or go to our website and download the ProRaceNow software manual.